A dead city brought a lost language back to life. No residents survived there, no living speaker was left to explain the writing. What remained were boxes of paper, seals, ledgers, and a script that looked almost like a code. In this episode, we will follow the city as it vanished, the writing as it was forgotten, and the evidence that allowed scholars to rebuild a broken world, page by page. You do not need to remember the unfamiliar place name yet. Picture a city whose walls stand in open desert. Wind erases the roads, the water channels dry up, trade routes move elsewhere. Centuries later, travelers see only earthen walls, ruined towers, and a place that barely looks like a city. This was Khara-Khoto, a city in what is now northwestern China. It once stood at a crossroads linking the Hexi corridor, the Mongolian plateau, and routes into Central Asia. A city can live by water and die when water, politics, and war shift together. But a city does not disappear all at once. Timber rots, buildings collapse, human memory breaks. In a dry desert, paper and silk can survive far longer than the people who made them. That is why the real question is not simply, why did the city vanish? It is this: when the people are gone, what can still speak for them? At the beginning of the 20th century, Khara-Khoto was not yet a lost civilization in a museum display. To outsiders, it was a rumor about a ruined city in the desert. The Russian explorer Pyotr Kozlov led an expedition across Mongolia and the regions around the Gobi between 1907 and 1909 and reached Khara-Khoto in 1908. He did not find a perfectly preserved city. He found walls and rooms half covered by sand. The discovery that changed the story stood outside the city, a Buddhist stupa. There was no gold, no royal crown, and no treasure chest in the usual sense. Instead, the stupa held Buddhist scriptures, woodblock prints, and manuscripts, some in Chinese, some in Tibetan, and many in a Tangut script that no living community could read. The material was not waiting neatly on library shelves. It lay among dust, ruined walls, and Buddhist images. Some books were intact, others had become loose pages and fragments. A large part of the collection was shipped to St. Petersburg and later entered Russian collections of Oriental manuscripts. Several years afterward, the British explorer Aurel Stein also worked at Khara-Khoto and recovered or recorded another body of material. The memory of one city began to leave the desert by different routes. This is the least romantic and most important moment in the story. The moment the writing was discovered was also the moment it was scattered. The city did not suddenly speak again. It divided its voice into many boxes. And inside those boxes was the hardest problem of all: a script that looked a little like Chinese characters but belonged to a different written world. The most difficult legacy of Khara-Khoto was a writing system. It looked somewhat like Chinese characters, but it was not Chinese. The strokes followed a familiar order, yet the world they formed was entirely different. The script belonged to the Tangut people of Western Xia, a kingdom in northwestern China that existed from the 11th to the 13th century. It had emperors, armies, laws, Buddhist traditions, and its own writing system. After Western Xia fell, however, the script lost the society that used it. There was no functioning school to visit, no community of native speakers to interview, and no convenient Tangut to modern language manual waiting on a desk. To later observers, the characters looked like a locked door without a key. But writing does not live only on monuments. It lives in contracts, sutras, prescriptions, tax records, letters, and printed books. The more complicated a society is, the more traces of ordinary life it leaves behind. Those ordinary traces became the entrance to the next chapter.
What makes the Khara-Khoto material valuable is not only its quantity, it is the way the pieces match one another. One sheet may be a contract, another may preserve the form used by the same institution. A Buddhist text may appear in Tangut alongside another language. A seal may identify the office behind a document. Each object is a fragment. Together, they begin to translate one another. That is why the story of a single genius suddenly cracking Tangut is misleading. A writing system is not as safe with one final combination. Scholars have to assemble different kinds of evidence. Character forms, repeated words, bilingual texts, dates, religious context, and administrative language. The documents from Khara-Khoto are now held, catalogued, and digitized by different collections and research institutions. They may no longer sit in one physical place, but they can meet again on the same research screen. There is a strange reversal here. The city was scattered, the documents were scattered, yet digitization has allowed them to form an invisible city again. That leaves us with one question for the final chapter. When the evidence is spread across the world, who gets to finish the city's story? The answer is not a universal key. It is the recognition that the writing belonged to a complete life. Tangut documents reveal how a state managed land, taxes, trade, medicine, and religious practice. They also show how ordinary people signed papers, borrowed money, bought goods, and argued over what was theirs. That changes the way we imagine a lost civilization. It is not always a grand palace waiting for a hero to uncover it. It can be a torn account, an unsent letter, or a scrap of paper beside a seal. No single fragment looks spectacular. Together, they tell us that people were living here. Khara-Khoto did not come back as a city where people could live again. It came back as a world that could be understood again. What died was not all of its meaning. What died was the everyday network that once connected people, city, and writing. Archaeology and language research follow the surviving threads and tie the broken network back together. I have watched cities rise from the roofline, and I have watched their names disappear from maps. The frightening part is not that a city becomes ruins, it is that it may lose the ability to prove it ever existed. Khara-Khoto left us not a secret code, but a warning. Once writing stops being used, it becomes silent. Yet as long as paper, seals, walls, and patient readers remain, silence does not have to be the end. If you want to follow more stories of how lost civilizations leave evidence behind, follow Hang Xi.